So starting down the route of completing the application, the first thing we recommend you do is get hold of the relevant application form. And as you can see here, via the link through individual membership and the member page, you can access the relevant application form. There's a separate form depending on what you want to do. If you're not already a professional member of the NI, then the middle column on the left-hand table would apply, and you would select and download. Each of those is a link. You would download the relevant application form, and that would contain the information I'm going to show you on the following screen, but it would particularly contain the relevant registration standards for you to compile your answers. There's also some short guidance on completing the forms available on the page. Sorry, I'll just flick back, rushing ahead of myself. If you are already a professional member of the NI, then the RF forms in the right-hand column would allow you to simply add easy for me to say, would allow you to add the application for registration without having to reapply or resubmit evidence against the Nuclear Delta and membership. Moving on to what's in the application form, if you look at the bullets on the left-hand side, the top four are particularly about you telling us about yourself and your background, and where we were talking about exemplifying qualifications, are you relevant job roles and that sort of thing. That's where you're basically giving us that information for us on receipt of your application to check and confirm that area. We do ask that you submit a CV along with that, and it's important that you make sure that reflects the details of the relevant work you've undertaken. So not just, maybe as you tweak a CV for different job applications, think about emphasizing the relevant employment in that CV. I'll come back to the current line manager and verification in a second. The middle section, and this is where you're going to need to spend the time preparing your planning and drafting your application. This is where you're going to capture your evidence. So if you're applying for member, there's the Nuclear Delta part, and then the competence commitment report, we call it, is where you capture the detail relevant to the applicable registration standards, and that's where you're looking to identify evidence of your workplace practice. There is likely to be some significant overlap between the evidence you choose to use for the Nuclear Delta and that which you might bring forward for sections of the competence and commitment form. So, for example, things like how you contribute and manage safety and security would probably feature very much in both areas. Involvement in improvement projects, learning from experience, that sort of thing could be used in both. The key kind of point here is that it's like the old adage about reading an exam question. It's making sure that when you're using one example against several sections, you read the requirement of the standard and make sure that the information you're containing in your application form addresses that. And there you can see on the right, there's just the top level. So each form has a little bit of instruction about completing the competence and commitment section. Okay, moving on, if I can. So just bear with me. This is an extract showing the registration standards for chartered engineer. Just use that example. It's the example where we have most applicants currently coming through the NI. And what you see there is the top level of the standard, then the second A1, A2, B1, B2, B3, etc. And then a little space. On the application form, that's a bigger space, but it expands. And that's where you would be asked to complete your submission and submit your evidence. We recommend around 2,000 to 2,500 words across all the sections, but it is just a recommendation. There is no word count, there's no cutoff. We ask you to bear in mind the assessors that have to read through the applications. But if you are compiling an application, and it's important to remember to include sufficient detail that the third-party assessor will be able to read into that and understand, if you like, visualize what your role and your contribution has been in the situations you're outlining. You can assume that those assessors are informed third parties. They're all, as I've said before, all have nuclear sector expertise, and will all have professional understanding of your area of work, in that they will have the engineering, environmental or science specialists and will assess applications from people in those areas. So it's not as if you need to compile your evidence for a lay person, but at the same time, if you are going to use organization-specific acronyms or whatever, then just include a quick explanation of what they mean. So word count, including sufficient information. And the last thing, which is again equally important, is the entries in your application form should be freestanding. And what I mean by that is, don't think that you're going to append half a dozen, 10 additional things, technical reports or whatever else, and cross-refer. It's important that you capture your evidence in the application form so that the person reading it can draw that understanding from the information included and not a lot of additional external information. We ask that you identify two people to essentially support your application: the proposer and a verifier. And if we go back, the verifier can often be your current line manager, but it can equally be someone, another member of the management team familiar with your work. If you're not in a line managed position, contractor or freelance, then it could be someone like a client, a contract manager that you deal with, a co-contractor in a different organization that's sort of fully versed in what you've been involved in. Possibly an independent evaluator, that sort of thing, but someone who's familiar with your work. And the verifier is effectively confirming that what you're putting in there is true and accurate, and we ask you to supply the contact details for us to verify that. The proposer is slightly different. That person should be at the same or higher grade of membership of the NI. If you don't have anyone that you know that falls into that category, then a person in a higher or the same grade of membership with another professional body is perfectly acceptable. And if applying for registration, then they should also be at the grade or higher grade of registration. And that person is effectively saying, I understand the requirements of professional registration and professional membership, and I am basically endorsing this person as someone who I believe will meet those standards. So that's the two different people that we would ask, and there is room for them to sign the form. In the current climate and going forward, electronic signatures are perfectly acceptable in doing this. And then the last little piece there, in terms of the checklist, documents attached, we do ask for the CV, I've already mentioned. Copies of relevant certificates, again, electronic signatures, or if you can't get that, then an email of confirmation that they've been seen and that they're supported. We do ask for an organisation chart, and again, that's can be a simple hand-drawn, or it can be something that you access from your HR system. It doesn't really matter, but what is important is that the assessors get a feel for the role and the responsibilities that you're in. And then the last 2 years CPD submission with a plan